Well, good morning and good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome again to our Patreon channel with our here on Aquarius or Solutions with Aquarius Rising Africa. And of course, our beautiful Jessie is a Botar and her book, 5 Minutes of Grief with God. We are on, I want to say chapter 4, but it's not chapter 4. So I'm going to say week 4 because we've covered a few chapters per week. But really good to have you back, Jess. Lovely. I'm really enjoying the series. So over to you. Thank you so much. And for everyone for joining. Really great to have you guys here. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I encourage people to go back if you've missed the earlier 3 sessions. There's a lot of good discussion in there, and if you're going through grief or having somebody go through grief, feel free to refer them back to those earlier episodes. I believe today we are on chapter 10, and I just want to prepare everybody that get out your Kleenexes. This might be a day more where uh, we're all crying as we go through this. There's some deeper things, but we'll be sensitive to that. So I'm going to read through chapter by chapter, and then we'll kind of pause and do a little discussion. So chapter 10 is titled, I Don't Want to Let You Go. After viewing Josiah's body, I needed some time alone. I asked a friend to keep the kids for a couple hours, and I went for a drive along the coast. For over 7 years, we had lived near the ocean. How many times I had driven that road and found quietness in my soul, gazing upon the extravagant handiwork of God. I knew where I needed to go. There was a little cove behind an old Catholic church that opened to the beach. I wanted to go to the place where I first had found solace, bearing my heart before the Lord. Where is your place of refuge? Where does your heart feel stillness and quietness? Take some time to go there and pour out your heart before the Lord until you hear his voice. Whisper those words you long to hear until he speaks and says that to the storm that is within your soul, peace be still. Never forget, even the wind and the waves obey him. It's so important. I've talked throughout this whole book so far about taking what I call just those 5 minutes with God. And if you can do that daily, that's really best. And it's just that time of unhindered, undistracted moments where you don't focus on anything else except for your grief. And a lot of people have asked me, what do those 5 minutes look like? And that's different for everybody. There are no rules. There's no perfect way to do it. We know that there's several different stages in grief, or we'll say emotions. There's moments you may be pleading with God. There's moments you might be angry or dealing with deep sadness. And it's okay to go there. It's okay to express, you know, those those deep feelings that you have. The only disclaimer that I'll give, and we kind of have to be our own evaluators in our grief. Sometimes we do need other people to evaluate us as well. So I encourage, if in your grief you're having suicidal thoughts or deep depression that you can't pull yourself out of, you need to not be afraid to ask for help and tell that to somebody. Um, but if it's not that deep depression, I also just want to give those moments of assurance that it's okay to express your true feelings to God. That there's, moments where you may feel like, I want to die too, or I wish I was there with them. Um, and it's okay to express that, but you still want to, the safeguard is you want to watch that if those feelings are getting out of control and it goes down the suicide line, then you need to put out that call for help. Some ideas for what that 5 minutes can look like, things that I have done, like I talked about today. I would go for long drives, just me and the Lord, or I would find a quiet spot. I had several little spots so I could change it up. But one of my favorite spots to go was one of our kids' fishing spots where there's just a big, large tree. And I'll just go and lay in the grass and look up and just pour out my heart to God, and nobody else is there. And, um, I'm free to just say or cry, say what I want or cry or do whatever I need to do. Um, the other thing for me that really helped was the writing, being able to just process those thoughts in poetic or artwork, um, or just in the words that I would write down. So I journaled a lot of it. Right after Josiah's death, we had a long drive back to where he was, and in that I made some, and maybe someday I'll release those. But I did a lot of processing verbally. So just that talking out loud, even if it's just to yourself, sometimes those things can help. Did anybody have any thoughts or questions about things that you can do in those 5 minutes that maybe you've gone through that have helped you?
No, but I could just like add definitely the creative process, that writing or doing some art form. It really, if I just reflect back, when I went out of school, I went to college, I studied animation, and all my projects that I created, when I finished it and I reflected on it, it was some kind of processing of what I've gone through with my childhood. At that moment, I didn't see it, but afterwards, looking at what I did, it was like mirrors to me dealing with whatever happened with me in my childhood, and it was kind of healing, and it was me processing and understanding it. And so, yeah, creativity definitely works. And the 5 minutes of grief, I just wanted to share. A friend of mine just recently lost a father, and I spoke with him this a week as well. And he talks about these 5 minutes of tears in the morning. When he wakes up, he has this like 5 minutes, he cries his eyes out, and then he puts on his face and goes back and stuff. So it was amazing. So I spoke to him about the 5 minutes of grief of God that your book and everything. And I think it's something that's very common in the sense of those, because like the last phrase that you said now, peace be still. And
Yeah.
those 5 minutes, it's like when you wake up, it's just everything is still, and then you just have to deal with it. You just have to feel it and allow it. So
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's amazing that he also spoke about the 5 minutes of his grief.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll start with the next chapter here.
I had a suggestion, if that's
Go right
all right.
ahead.
In my grief periods, it has been strangely helpful for me to go out and be with nature, like you talked about, but physically pulling out weeds and cutting up branches, and the physical exertion is good, but I guess in my brain it's like pulling out the stuff that some of it's dead and some diseased maybe, but it feels good to, I don't know, it maybe bonding with the earth is part of it, but part of it is just extracting the things that maybe I don't want to be there, or that hurt, or
Mhm.
I don't know. It's not meant to sound like a violent thing, but
No, but it is. There can be moments of that, that physical aggression, acts of aggression, um, or that represent acts of aggression, just to be that release for some of that anger. It sounds like that's what is kind of behind that, is just some of that anger.
yeah, I need that. And I know that in order to stave off anxiety and depression, I need the sunlight is so beneficial. And I know that the sweat helps. And I think if I'm moving, then I'm not stuck crying in a corner, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's positive. Go ahead, please. You were saying.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think that's a really positive way, and it's a healthy choice, because there are, yourself, and there are moments where that grief or loss can just make you feel like you're frozen and like you can't do anything. And so it's good to, if that's where you'll end up, make that choice that you're going to just stay active, and you're going to let that release rather than being frozen.
Yes. And I know that so many people will want to numb out and medicate through various means. And I don't drink, and I don't want to go that direction or numb out in other regards. So that has been one of my tools, if that's fair.
Yeah. I'm glad that's a great tool, and I'm glad you brought up the self-medicating. Um, that, I guess that's part of, the 5 minutes of grief, is to give you that outlet so that people are not self-medicating in an unhealthy way.
Right.
And in a way, you're kind of coming up with, as the Lord leads, that medication, we'll use that term loosely, but you're using those 5 minutes as that healthy medication that's going to bring healing, not just be a symptom reliever, because that's really what self-medicating is. It doesn't lead us through that spiritual or physical healing process that we need in grief. What it does is it covers up the symptoms and makes it so we can kind of function or cope with those symptoms lessened. But what happens if that continues is that all of the the issues continue to fester, and diseased is a great word for that. Fester and get diseased, and then it will all surface as a big nasty mess eventually. And that's what we don't want in our grief or loss. We don't want more mess or more chaos or something so big that we can't tackle, handle, or control it. We want to have that. I'll say it's a 50-50 control in the grieving loss situation. We want to have half the control, but we also want to allow the Lord to have the other half of the control. And there has to be that mutual sharing of the grief in that healing process. So I'm glad you brought up some of those terms today. That was really good.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah. But let's head into the next chapter here. And I'll just say, people have asked why I have a lot of memories in this book. And that's because that's what I needed to process, were some of the things. And this chapter is really hard for me. I'll just give that disclaimer, and, might stir up a lot of stuff for you guys as well. But it's called Master Escape Artist. Beginning from 7 months, Josiah became a master escape artist. His little spirit so free and the challenge I will never forget the morning I walked into his room to get him out of his crib, and as I walked into the room, he grabbed the sides of his crib only to pole vault out of it. He landed on both feet perfectly with his big blue eyes, looked up at me with a smirk. Soon there was nothing that his little mind could not conjure up. Any challenge in his way was quickly moved. He used to stand intently. He would stare for about 5 minutes at those locks. Then suddenly he would approach it and hit it just in the right spot, shattering the lock to pieces. Before I knew it, he would have bypassed the baby lock and out the front door he was running, with poor little me chasing after. It soon became known to everyone, including the nursery workers at church, that nothing was going to hold Josiah back. Josiah was not afraid to really live, nor of being a go-getter. He was so passionate about experiencing every moment of life with others. To me, community service was a discipline that I desired to ingrain in all of my children. It brought me such joy to have little Josiah by my side as we engaged in community events. One of our favorites was to knit and crochet hats, scarves, mittens, and afghans for the homeless. Just have to excuse me for a moment. Josiah's expertise was fingerless gloves. Out of all the boys, he was the only one who had learned to knit with the 5 double-pointed needles. Diligently, he would focus. Just give me a few more minutes. So, this was one of my favorite things about Josiah. Anyway, out of all the boys, he was the only one who had learned to knit with 5 double-pointed needles. Diligently, he would focus to create his items and get them ready to present at the local fairs in the summer. And we would sell them at a bazaar that I attended during the holiday season. All the little ladies at the bazaar would get such a kick seeing my boys there with me. There were not many boys who took the time to learn the art of knitting and crocheting. I still laugh remembering how my boys sold all their items and made out they made out like little bandits while I would be left with a lot of my items. But I love doing that. We had a lot of fun. Knitting and crocheting were not our only community endeavors. In Josiah's early teens, he liked to attend one of the local youth groups. It usually was once a week and was at a larger church in the area than the one that we weekly attended. One day, Josiah came home all excited and told me that the church had so many kids that they had started a second youth group. He asked for permission to attend twice a week. I was so glad he was so enthusiastic about growing his faith and being more involved in fellowship. It was a good 6 months from that time he had asked when someone I worked with in the community asked me to join them at the church and to hear their story at Celebrate Recovery. When I arrived, what did I find? I found Josiah in the kitchen, cooking meals and serving food. It was not an extra youth group. Josiah had found his own ministry niche. Once a week, he was in the kitchen, cooking and serving the service with all the local individuals working through recovery that I worked with. Excuse me.
Jess.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
But
Us, I so feel with
We'll
you.
just stop that chapter for now. But yeah, it was so precious. He really loved those guys. And that was something that both of our hearts really shared. It was just a love for people. And it was so beautiful to see how the Lord answered, that prayer for my kids to be in ministry. And I'm so grateful that, when he passed, there was so many people who had been in those programs or at those churches that he had ministered to, who came. And it was funny to see how many of those people, like literally the Lord had both Josiah and I ministering to them at different times in different places. So, I would see them at the shelters or out on the streets, or, be called to help work with them in the community. And I'd be working with them throughout the week. And then in the evenings, they would go to the churches for meals and stuff. And that's where Josiah, would be ministering to them. And, he knew absolutely everybody, which was just so funny. And, many of them at first I don't think didn't get the connection that he was my kid and stuff until we were all together, and it was like, oh, you know him too. So kind of funny, but very good memories. And it's okay to let those tears out, everybody. So, but as you can see, that's still the deep spot of my grieving. So, but what I wanted to talk about with that, and maybe Chantelle, you can maybe lead the discussion for a moment on this, but how do we process um, those lost hopes and dreams when things that we've longed for, um, don't come to pass or stop? So maybe let's discuss that for a few minutes.
I think in my situation, that after my fiance was killed, it took me about 6 months to realize, and I was driving home one night from a friend, and the reality hit me. I would never see this person again, and I would never hear their voice again. I would never touch them or smell them or feel them. So the physical aspect of that for me, and that was a very big shock. So how I dealt with that was I'm forever praying and meditating. I always tell people that. So for me, I started giving back to my community. What I did was I took a lot of his clothes and stuff that I'd had that I knew I was starting to hoard, and it wasn't a healthy thing I was keeping. For example, I had the clothes he was killed in, and I kept them one side, and I was not prepared to part with those for love or money. But I did. And they'd been washed and dry cleaned, and I gave them to my gardener who knew him. And I said, this is from him. If you want it, please keep it. And when he arrived at work the next week, he was wearing them. And it was a beautiful thing. So for me, that was really just enabling me to move forward, to let the little things go that I didn't think I could let go of. And I think for every person that might be different, because we do things that we are ready for at the time. So for me, that was just realizing it was a shock. And I think I was connected with God enough to realize that God heard me and gave me a way forward. That was very healing. After that, I was able to then move forward again, let things go, enjoy watching the sunrise again and watching the sunset and listening to music we enjoy together. So I started doing that. I stopped doing those things for a long time, but I started again after that. And that in itself is very healing. I found actually to listen to your favorite song together and suddenly for it not to hurt you anymore, but suddenly for it to start feeling smiles and those emotions that were good. That's where it began for me. I don't know how that was for you, Jess, or if anyone else would like to say something.
Yeah, hear from others, but yeah, we had the music too, where we would dance and, you know, be silly in the car to Josiah's favorite playlist, and the songs he listened to, it was like, what? Some of them make us laugh, like Trip to Mexico. I don't know if anybody's heard that song, but it's quite a trip.
Well, Hannes was an Austrian, so I spent lots of time in Austria, and there was this Austrian singer, guy called Hubert von Geusen, but he was like this hilarious guy, and he was like wearing these funny Austrian clothes and stuff, and the Austrians used to have a lot of fun with him. He was a bit like, I suppose, these South African guys who make fun of our South African music and the language, you know.
Right.
So that was very funny. So we used to laugh a lot to that. He used to explain to me what it meant and, you know, all of these things. So that I must say was great fun. So I had some of those CDs as well. And when I could start listening again to that, I could literally hear him laugh along with me. That was when I knew my healing was on the road. I mean, it's been many years, but
yeah,
there are days where it's very raw.
Yeah. And that's part of the, you know, process, is that, you know, we have those ups and downs, but then we come to that place of acceptance, and, you know, when we can listen to the music that, you know, we used to share with them, or remember the good or the bad times, um, you know, and just be able to have a peace about it. That's when we know that we've come to that place of acceptance. And it doesn't mean that, you know, we never think about it again, or it never comes up, or, you know, that we still don't have those raw moments. It just means that, you know, the majority of the time, then we're able to let that grief rest, and we're able to carry on with our daily lives without that grief being, um, you know, at the forefront of everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And I like how you talked about, you know, for you, that process. And one of the things that came to mind is that, you know, as we go through that process, that there's a lot of questions that come up, or a lot of those, maybe it's not even questions, just statements, or those thoughts that will flash through our mind, you know, like, I'll never touch this person again, I'll never hear their voice. And, you know, however you need to deal with those, you want to find a healthy way. And, you know, whether that's just verbally processing it out loud to someone else, whether it's writing those down, um, you know, but take time to, you know, maybe make a list when you get those thoughts, and then to take that 5 minutes to work through the feelings that surface with that. I do a lot of, I guess you would call it, it's a type of processing mapping, where, I'll put the thought or whatever that is, and then when I go back to process it more, I'll put the feelings around it, and I'll give space. I'll honor each of those feelings and maybe explore, like if I put down anger, then I'll process around that. What is the anger towards? And you may find that you have some anger towards that person. Maybe they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe, you don't understand, you don't have the closure, you don't know why what happened. Maybe there were other people that were involved in the situation that led towards that person's death. And, it's okay to vent that anger and to take time to do that, and then go back and give that release of forgiveness. Choose to forgive what happened. And sometimes, that forgiveness includes a letting go, realizing that no matter what someone else may have tried to do or what they didn't do, understanding that ultimately that moment of, your loved ones crossing over was in God's hands, that nobody had the control of time, of life or death, only God, and we can't change that time, which sometimes that's the hardest thing to accept, that we couldn't change that time. So,
Yeah.
So much
That's-
easier to let someone go when you've prepared, like you've watched them disintegrate, they're sick, it's coming. But when someone is ripped from you, the process of grieving is so much longer. And, I had my dad, like, he was my best friend, talked to him every day. If I had a question, it was like, hey Dad, what do you know about this? And so now I find myself like, I can't do that. I can't just call him randomly. And so it's like, who do I call? And so I find myself almost like the what would Jesus do and what would Dad do moments, but it's forced me into talking to God a lot more, because I'm like, I have good people in my life, but not like my dad, and so
yeah.
So now I just pick up the phone and call God. It helps. But it's a process, and I thank you for walking us through this and sharing those special moments that you have. I think we all probably had flashes in our mind of things that, like Christmas coming up, my dad started playing Santa, and just because it brought him joy, almost retired, grew a big old beard out. He was so happy about it. I had to go to an apple orchard and tell them, sorry, my dad passed. He can't play Santa for you. And just a couple days ago, and that was hard. And it's just like, it's still, there's triggers that just keep coming, and working through those triggers. That's when I find myself taking my 5 minutes, because I have to pause and, and just let it out, but then pull up the big girl pants again and just be like, okay, life goes on. Like they're in good hands, but so.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm glad you shared that, because it does, there are those continued triggers that come up sporadically, usually at the times you're least expecting, and but there are triggers also that we can prepare for. The holidays is a big one. So, I encourage people kind of maybe take time to process, make a list, know what you want to do, and why, you're going to do it. Usually it helps if you're going to do something special, during that season or time. Like, one of the things Josiah would always wear, really bright colored, interesting shirts at, at events and stuff like that, and had this one flamingo shirt. So um, this past year when we had our family Easter time, it's like one of those times where you wouldn't think that the stores are going to have these interesting flamingo shirts, but I think I had one of my kids needed socks, and then I saw they had out all these, dress flamingo shirts, and so I bought one for each of the boys, and so for Easter they all wore these flamingo shirts for the family event and stuff. So just coming up with fun stuff like that, or Josiah and I always, it wasn't usually ornaments, but one of the traditions that I always did with my kids was we would always look for a special ornament to put on the tree each year. And the last year, Josiah had found these little gnome ones, and him and his dad were really into the gnomes. And, they just thought it was funny. And it went back to like a cartoon we used to watch when he was little called David the Gnome, that is actually a really cute little cartoon. So, this year when we had Christmas, I went out and I found little gnome ornament with the beach thing, which, the beach also was a big theme in our lives. And, so I bought that and plan to put that on the tree every year. And so just, coming up with creative little things like that, or if somebody who's grieving, little things like that can be little memories that they can keep and put out every year, can be special gifts and stuff. So
I have some work to do. I've got those ideas exactly. My dad liked wearing Hawaiian shirts, so I'm going to make pillows out of his Hawaiian shirts and give to, like, I'll keep one. I'm going to give one to Naomi, my daughter, and my mom, and maybe send one to his mom, who's still alive and kicking. She's 96 now, I think. So yeah, send one to them. And I had made him these t-shirts to wear that had like Santa sayings, but they all pointed to Christ. So he could have like that under his, Santa suit. And so I'm going to cut those out and make a t-shirt quilt for Christmas, and just kind of have
that's a great idea
together. So I've got some work to do, and time's ticking.
Yeah. Right.
But,
well, maybe give yourself a little break. No, you might not get it all done this Christmas. Maybe it's continual projects that you can work on.
True. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Did anybody else have any great ideas that they wanted to share?
It seems like you're saying, or a lot of the ideas or concepts or tools have been solo thus far. It seems like it's good to have, yes, your community, but more importantly, kind of your, and I hate to say accountability partner, because that is, that sounds like it's linear or something like that. But I meant, it seems like when you have tragedy, it's important to know who is on your side. I mean, who's with you, and who's the person that is going to send flowers or have a card and never contact you again. And right. I just mean, like, who are your allies and who are your not so much allies, kind of a thing. And it's helpful, I think, to have your allies check in with you and reach out, because when you're struggling, you generally don't go, oh, I need to get out of the house, or I need to whatever. It is nice to have your allies contact you and say, and kind of go, okay, how are you grieving? And is it healthy grieving, or is it something else? Or just make an assessment And it seems like healthy partners are those that will allow your process, but be prayerfully considerate and say, okay, let's get you out of the house, or you seem a little stuck, and not in a mean way, but in a commanding, like, okay, I think, as you can tell, I'm a person that does action. I think, but I do know, it just, to me, it's helpful to sort out those people who say, oh, go get therapy, and the people who will be therapeutic.
I really love that term that you used. And, even, or I'll say, for most of us, it is a compound grief situation where you're dealing with multiple individuals who are all grieving at the same time. And, there's a lot of implications that come up with that. So it is good to have someone outside of that circle that, is able to be that accountability person. And, um, sometimes we don't know how to put into words what we need. And we just need somebody who's going to, suggest, or like you said, command, to just kind of take that lead and direct you where you need to go, to say, okay, you've got work tomorrow. What do you need to be functional for that? What can I take off your plate? Um, maybe it's making dinner and having dinner for you, ready for you when you get home that day. Maybe it's making lunch, or saying, do you have something for lunch? Because those are the things that when you're in that deeper grief area, you don't often think of those little things. You're just stuck on the emotions. You're stuck on trying to just think step by step what you need to do each day. And you don't see the big picture. You kind of, I don't know how to describe that. Does anybody else have better words? But it's kind of like you're stuck in this little zone, but it's not your normal regular zone. And most of us multitask so much every day, but it's like you can only focus on the one little thing, and you can't see all the other things happening in your life at that moment.
Absolutely.
It reminds me of a computer or something like that, and you have this grief, and the grief is spinning, 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 and that's the process that you're working on, and nothing else. You don't have enough bandwidth, or you don't have enough for anything else.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's normal, that you just can't see that overall picture. Um, another way to think of that is, for most of us, we kind of have a three-way calendar constantly going in our mind. We know what we have to do within each hour usually. Then we have kind of the weekly calendar, and we have a monthly or a yearly, and most of the time you can, at a moment's thought, you can be switching from one to the other. But in that grief process, you kind of lose that ability, where you're just like, I can't even think. I don't know what I need to do. I don't, you kind of, it's like you just got this blank, like somebody scrubbed your whole calendar, and you're like, I don't even, oh yeah, I'm supposed to eat, or the kids need to be fed, or oh yeah, I had an appointment. Um, you just kind of lose track of everything. And, I feel that's normal. Um, which is why I encourage people to write things down, make lists, even if, you know, in those moments where you're doing your 5 minutes, if something else comes, don't feel like you have to deal with it like right then and there. Write it down. and then you come back to it another day. You know, it helps to make lists of the things you have to do. You know, what is your schedule for that day? What has to get done? When does it have to get done? So that's a good tool for people who are walking beside others with grief. You know, because there are continued things even after the burial or the service for the loved one. You know, ask them, what do you have, you know, when do you have to go back to work? When do the kids have to go back to school? Does somebody need to call and notify the school that kids are out of school because of the grief? You know, how long can that time be? Are there notes that have to be turned into the schools or to the jobs? You know, making sure, you know, that's something others could help with. You know, and then asking simple things, you know, groceries, cleaning the house. Uh, you know, meals were a big thing for me because that was an easy thing for others to take off my plate for the first couple weeks.
Yeah.
That just gave me extra time. And then, you know, if they helped with meals and dishes, then I didn't have to, you know, worry about that. Pets is another thing that easily
yeah.
can be overlooked in grief. So asking, do you have a pet? Can I stop by and feed the pet while you're gone so you don't have to worry about that? So seeing what you can do to help or what you can take off their plate is often good. Finding out what commitments they had, if they did have appointments that could be rescheduled, you know, that's something a friend can help with. So, well, very good discussion today. Did anybody else have anything else they would like to maybe bring out today?
I
All
hate
right.
I have one
Go
more
ahead.
thought, and I hate to dominate. I thought of Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips' suggestions or his sort of routine for her, and that was wearing a watch, which sounds crazy, but to help keep track of time. You know, that's just a suggestion, but and I think that he was careful with her not to have her talk about things because it might escalate. And that's my thought. That's my theory behind that. And she wrote and wrote and wrote. And the rationale or the reason behind it is because we can speak faster than we talk or than we write. I'm sorry. We speak faster than we write. And the writing makes you slow down.
Yeah.
So,
And you're focused on each word you're saying as well. There's that connection between, you know, you're not just verbally just, you know, giving a massive download, but you have to actually think as you write out because you're spelling each word at a time. And so it makes you kind of holds that space in your mind for the emotions or the words that you're putting out, you know. So those are great suggestions. Well, great discussion today, everybody. And I'm really glad that we got to go through this one today. And I kind of gave that little warning it was going to be a cry day. So I'm I hope you all feel
Thanks.
like that a little bit of emotional release.
Mm,
But let's
absolutely.
close with prayer and then I'll let you close up, Chantelle. Heavenly Father, we just thank you that you are here with us. Thank you for this processing time that we're able just to talk and explore and think through things that will help others. I just pray for each person who watches this video or who goes back that you would give them the tools that they need in their own grieving process, but also that we may bless others that we know who are grieving. And we thank you that you are doing such a good work in our lives. And although it may be hard, we give you the glory and the praise because you do get us through. You do lift up our heads. You do bring us from that place of sorrow to a place of joy and laughter again. And we ask that you would restore all that to us double fold, Lord. And we just thank you and ask for that continued healing in our lives.
Amen.
Amen. Jess, you disappeared there mid-prayer.
It-
But it's fine. I think we got it. We got the gist of it. Thank you so much. Oh, wow, Jessie, thank you so much for today. As you say, time for the emotions to come up, unexpected little curveballs, but really good. So we look forward to seeing you in a month's time again. We'll keep you guys posted as to exactly the date. But thank you so much for joining us again, everybody. God bless you all and take good care of yourselves. Thank you, Jess. Thanks, Morning.
all right, bye-bye.
Everyone. Cheers.